What's up, and War Eagle War Report family? You got Ike Jones back again. This time we're talking about the other side of the football. It looks as if Ron Roberts is not going to be returning to the Auburn Tigers in the 2024 season, and we are here to talk about it. War Report Special Live. You guys go ahead and tap in. Thoughts on the one-year tenure now of defensive coordinator Ron Roberts. Joining me in here live today as well, my guy Mike G. Mike G's in here. We're talking about Ron Roberts not coming back. Mike, big fan of Ron Roberts. How are you feeling in the wake of this news about Ron Roberts?
Okay. So, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're good. And then you muted yourself for some reason. I don't know why you did that. But yes, Mike G, big fan of Ron Roberts, having Mike G with Mike Troubles. But it's crazy, man. We are right back into the year one, both coordinators being gone in the same type of situation as it was with the last coach. Mike G, looks like you're good to go. Thoughts on this whole situation?
So we've been sitting on this one for a few days.
Yeah.
So this was not unexpected.
Yeah.
This was a matter of working out logistics, Ike. It seems like they've worked it out. Ron Roberts will not be back as defensive coordinator. So let's talk about what we know.
Yeah.
Ron Roberts, I thought he did a stellar job on the field with Auburn for a defense that was talented but not deep, Ike. Mm-hmm. So they had players, but I think this defense outperformed expectations in year one of Hugh Freeze's tenure. And Ron Roberts was at the helm of that, so he gets credit for that. But in all the talk about culture, like about the disease of me and other things that were permeating the locker room, what we knew was Ron Roberts was a negative part of that culture. So he was not well liked. There were reports of borderline abusive language at points. And it looks like Hugh Freeze has made the decision that it is not in the best interest of the culture of the program to bring him back at this time. So that's where we stand with Ron Roberts. This wasn't necessarily about the job that he did.
Yeah.
This was about the mix of personalities and a way of doing things that also I think is a good sign for Hugh Freeze.
Yeah.
I do. I think that when you can look at a guy who's done a decent job, but say, hey, look, I don't think you may be a good fit here for these reasons. That's to me, that's a sign of effective leadership.
Yeah. I mean, listen, as you said, we had heard word that there were some I mean, let's just go back to the whole situation with Coach Wesley McGriff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, I feel okay in saying now that a lot of the situations around why Wesley McGriff decided to take a step back from on the field duties at Auburn was due to clashes that he had with Ron Roberts. And it wasn't just philosophical differences, right? It was about just a workplace culture that he didn't feel comfortable with. So in an effort to try to keep peace through the remainder of the season, he decided to take a step back and just allow for them to figure it out through the remainder of the year. And then at the end of the season, he decided to move on and allow for Coach Freeze to figure out what he wanted to do with his staff, as opposed to being an impediment to that process.
Right.
And so, it became a situation where when it's staff and players that are having an issue with the defensive coordinator, they need to go in a different direction. Right now, I don't know to the degree of how often this stuff was happening, but it was enough for there to be rumblings.
Yeah,
Coach Freeze needed to make a move.
I'll go a little further.
Well, he wasn't fired, so let me be clear about that.
Correct.
Auburn did not fire him. It was a mutual parting of ways. They allowed him to go look for other jobs, and it's rumored that he's going to be taking a co-DC spot at the University of Florida right now to coach, co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. But anyway, continue.
This was. I would say this is probably as close to a firing as you can get without it being an actual fire. Yeah. Again, they wanted to make a change here, right? Like they wanted to make a change. They saw the need for a change. It was not, this situation with him, my understanding, our sources are telling us, had become untenable in the locker room. And if you look at the job he did on the field, now a lot of people, I know there were a lot of people calling for his firing after 4th and 31 and only rushing two. But the totality of this season was so much more than that. So this underscores how much of an issue this was going to be for Hugh Freeze if he brought him back. I think it would be foolish to think that this would not have maybe even had some effect on players if, again, some of the things that we heard are true about abusive language and just overall not speaking to people with respect, right? So, Hugh Freeze is, from what I understand about Hugh Freeze, he's big on that stuff. He is. He speaks to guys a certain way. He tries to operate in a certain way. He tries to be transparent, and he tries to be he understands that words have impact. He does. And Rob Roberts maybe didn't fit totally with that. So, that's where we're at right now. That's where we're at right now. Everything right now is speculative, though. Right. Everything is speculative. So, in terms of like where he's going and everything that's happening, all we know for sure is he's not returning, and we know the reasons why he's not returning.
Right.
So, good for Hugh Freeze, man, for standing on business here in terms of culture. I think that this is a good sign to your team when you're talking to your team about the disease of me and culture to show that you're holding the staff to the same standards is a good thing to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it should be mirrored in the way that people are treating each other around the facility. So hopefully, everything works out well for Ron Roberts in his new place. And it might just be a situation where it wasn't a good fit at Auburn. That doesn't mean that Ron Roberts is a bad person, right? It just might not have been a good fit for him in this environment, and hopefully wherever he lands next will be a good place for him. Because again, I think that he did do a really good job with this defense. For the most part, right? There are some examples where it didn't look great, but I don't know that there is a defensive coordinator out there that every single game, every single play, you're like, oh, this is amazing. They did exactly what you
this was so great. Yeah. No,
so and again, even if the examples are really bad, there are a lot of really good examples that are out there as well. So moving on into kind of where Auburn goes from here on out, you got to ask, the same question that you ask when you go from the other side is, who are the potential replacements that could come in and be defensive coordinator for Auburn? Names that have been floated around out there that we have heard so far. A lot of this is coming from the 247s on threes of the world that are trying to get the scoop on this, is that the options would be a guy like Chris Kiffin, who is currently coaching for the Houston Texans in the NFL. He was rumored during the first offseason of Coach Freeze as a potential defensive coordinator hire when he was working for the Cleveland Browns. And then the other name that's being floated around out there is Zach Arnett, former head coach of Mississippi State / defensive coordinator. And again, another name that was being floated out in the original offseason of Coach Hugh Freeze as a potential DC hire until he was promoted from interim head coach to the permanent head coach there at Mississippi State in that 1-year experiment that they had there. And then the other options would be already Charles Kelly, who is here on campus and was hired as a co-defensive coordinator, stepping into the full DC spot, and then having someone on staff be a co-DC with him. So it'd be interesting to see what direction that the coaching staff decides to go if all things work out the way that they want to going forward. But of the options that are potentially out there, is there anybody that sticks out to you and like, oh man, I would love to have this guy be the next defensive coordinator?
Yeah, I tried to think about this when we heard this might be coming down. As of now, like, I think I'd rather make that determination based on the list of guys that we know may be like actual candidates for the job. It'll be interesting to see. Listen, Roberts, from a schematic standpoint, wasn't a bad hire for Hugh Freeze. As a matter of fact, I thought it was one of his better hires in terms of results on the field. So, there will be some pressure, I think, to repeat those results. And he's going to have to make a good hire here, because here's what happens, man. This guy walks out the door. There's going to be a lot more pressure on your offense in year 2 of this thing than there was in year 1. You may have another brand new starting quarterback. You've got a high profile freshman offensive class coming in. You got to take steps towards being the type of program that you want to be beyond 2025, and that starts with not letting 2024 fall off the rails.
Yeah.
You got the 6 wins in large part because your defense had your back in many, many games this year. So whoever they bring in, I assume they may bring somebody in who brings a similar off defensive philosophy in to try to create some continuity. We'll see who lines up with that, or maybe they decide to go a different direction. Either way, I think Auburn should be an attractive job. We talked about the differences, Ike, between Brian Hartsone's first year and Hugh Freeze's first year. I want to highlight one notable difference between the two, although they both ended in bowl losses, painful losses to Alabama. A lot of similarities here. Collapses during the season, ineffective quarterback play at times. I'd argue that Harsin had better quarterback play with both. One of the marked differences between the two first years is the perception of hope and the options to hire high-level coordinators in year 2.
Very true.
Harsin did not Austin Davis fell through, and that was it.
Yeah.
They couldn't get anybody of merit to come here because the perception is that he was a lame duck coach, and no matter what you did, you're going to be out of the job in maybe less than 10 months, right, which would have been true since he got fired mid-season. Hugh Freeze does not have this problem, and I think this is the good thing they've done for him is setting up hey, we're behind him. He just brought in a top 7 class. Hey, it might be top 5 before it's all over with,
right? And
he's got the full support of the community, most of the community, and the administration. So he should be able to go out and attract top-level candidates to this job. I have no doubt. I think, and when they saw what this defense did on paper last year, mixed with the talent that they're bringing in, the high-level talent that they're bringing in, I think that defensive coordinators should be chomping at the bit to get in here and try to coach this Auburn defense.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things potentially that are from what you see of the trajectory of the program in recruiting and the talent that you have the opportunity to come in and coach. There should be some people who are excited at the opportunity to come in and be a part of this Auburn staff going into the future. If you're just joining us live, we are talking about Ron Roberts, who has rumored to be taking a job at Florida and will not be retained on the Auburn staff, as he will be moving on to be a co-DC/linebackers coach for the University of Florida, which if you're talking about going from one ship, two programs that seem to be going in opposite directions, I mean, I'm not saying that Auburn is all roses and sunshine over here, but good Lord, Florida, he's got his work cut out for him over there in Florida, because there's a lot of unrest over there with the natives there in Florida. If you guys haven't already, please do the necessary sharing the video out there at the War Report. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Mike, I want to go here to the comment section so we can get some people and see what they're talking about before we give some additional comments. We'll start it with Drew Kahn, who says, "What the hell is going on? I was so excited about Freeze, and how bad could the culture be for no one to want to be here?" When we say no one wants to be here, I don't think that that's very true. There's a lot of people that are really excited about what is happening at Auburn. That's from recruits to, like you said, there's potential hires that are out there that want to come in. A lot of guys who could have potentially gone, well, not a lot, but there are guys who could have potentially gone pro who are deciding to come back and play an additional season. So there are things to be excited about with Auburn. There's plenty of things that are not right? But that is kind of what happens when you have regime changes. There's going to be a lot of things that are just going to be problems that you've got to figure out how to fix. And that's going to be the major thing for Coach Freeze here in year 2, is now that he's gotten the engine going on the recruiting thing, is to figure out how to fix these other things internally that are going to continue to plague him unless he finds a way to not put a patch or a Band-Aid on it, but get some real resolution to it and get some repair done to those portions of his ship.
Yeah. Look, I think a lot of people will try to make a correlation between Philip Montgomery and Ron Roberts not coming back. I want to stress that these two situations are completely unrelated.
Yeah, no, listen, Ron Roberts, if everything that we've heard about internally in that locker room are true things, it needed to happen.
It needed to happen, yeah.
Philip Montgomery, in my opinion, was inevitable. Like,
Yeah.
maybe not year one, but I don't know that Coach Freeze was going to be, unless it went perfectly in year one. The seed in his mind of I'm not comfortable with this and it not going well was enough for that to be doomed. For
It
him to
was
do
maybe
that.
it was maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy in a
That-
lot of ways, right?
yeah,
Like, yeah, like he was like, I've never done this before, and how's it gonna go? And there was a tug of war. Look, he was clear that he didn't meddle in the defense this year.
yeah,
He said, I go in there sometimes to help those guys with third down calls, but that's about it. So he let Ron Roberts do the job. One got fired for on the field schematic things, and the other, they're moving on from for other reasons. So, file Ron Roberts under other if you're
yeah,
checking boxes, and just understand. I want the listeners to understand these two things, are completely unrelated. Harsin turned over both coordinators in year one, did he not?
yes,
Yeah, both coordinators in year one. And this is a different situation for Freeze. I want people to really understand this is a different situation. They did a lot of very positive things in year one of his tenure. Ron Roberts, this is the type of decision that you get paid $6 million a year to make. When a guy has has done an acceptable job in terms of on-field coaching and the things that are his primary job responsibilities that are front-facing to the public, and then you got these behind-the-scene things that, like I said, if what we heard was true about what was going on in that locker room, it would have been it would have been conduct detrimental to the program to keep him on staff.
yeah,
Absolutely would have been. So they've got to move on here. They will. Whoever's coming in, they're going to have a lot of talent to work with, and they've got to have a very bright future with the Auburn defense, assuming they get other things together. So, like I said, this is a more attractive job, to potential defensive coordinator candidates. And I believe that Hugh Freeze is going to be able to attract a high-level candidate to take over this Auburn defense.
yeah, absolutely. Jumping in here, super chat. Say what?
I see you guys saying T-Will. And respectfully, I would like to submit Travis Williams' name for defensive coordinator. Matter of fact, I'm texting him right now.
I'm about to say, I would not be mad at that.
I'm tampering. I'm allowed to tamper.
Charles Allen jumps in here with the super chat. Appreciate that very much. What do y'all think about Zach Arnett as DC? Listen, I was a fan of them potentially doing this last year when Coach Freeze came on. There's no reason for me to feel any differently about that right now. Because Zach Arnett was a good defensive coordinator when he was at Mississippi State. He didn't have, he wasn't loaded with talent there, but that defense was always competitive, very aggressive defense. I don't have any issues with Zach Arnett. He wasn't a good head coach, right? I think the decision to pivot away from an offense that was similar to the one that your quarterback had been killing it with for 2 years straight was not a good one. And he made some questionable in-game decisions. He wasn't very charismatic, but you don't need to be any of those things to be a defensive coordinator. You just need to know how to call a good defense, and I think that he does a good job of that. It would cause some changes to have to happen to scheme. They'd be playing, right now we're playing more of a 4-2-5. He plays a 3-3-4, but if you're playing a hybrid safety linebacker, the difference is that 3 in the 3-3-4 would be coached by a linebacker coach, right? And so that person who's a hybrid would then move into the linebacker room as opposed to being in the DB room. But he could do a lot of the same things schematically. They might just need to change it from being what would be a 3-3-5. I said 3-3-4, excuse me, 3-3-5 to a 4-2-5. So we'll see what he decides to do. Or if he's hired. Like I said, I'm talking as if this is a done deal. But if he goes from a 3-3-5 to a 4-2-5, then it would fit what they're already doing schematically and have some of that B-Will buzzword continuity that you'd like to have out there. So we'll see. Thank you for gifting some memberships there, Tiffany. We appreciate that very much. Tim, the tool main, Taylor says, is there going to be any fallout from this from a player standpoint? Were there any players who were committed so much to Ron Roberts? The only guy that I could think of, honestly, would be a guy like Griffin Speaks, right? Like, he was at Baylor with Ron Roberts, and But I think that he was the only one tied to Ron Roberts.
Right. Yeah,
Maybe.
I'm gonna say no, and I
I
would I
mean,
would say that.
I don't know. I don't know enough.
Yeah,
I haven't talked to enough players, but I think there are enough guys who he wasn't popular with in the locker room where
correct. Yeah, I want to make the opposite correlation. If the locker room stuff that we heard is true, this might actually have a positive effect
yeah.
on anybody who was maybe on the fence, right? Like, so I think that's a better way to look at it. And we were clear about some of the things that were happening there, or alleged to have happened. And if that's the reason you're making a decision, I have to imagine that the net effect would be positive.
Yeah.
Right? You're sending a message to your players, Ike, that I'm holding my coaches to the same standards I've been screaming in the media that I'm holding you to. That's what this move says to me. I like it. I think this is big boy stuff here that Hugh Freeze is doing.
Yeah, and let me be clear because I saw somebody saying it. Ron Roberts was not fired, right?
No,
He
no.
got another job that Auburn is not standing in the way of him doing. So this is not a firing. He's just not coming back to Auburn next year, and it looks like he will be moving on to another job.
Yeah.
We will again. It's one of those situations where you wish him the best and hopefully, but I thought Ron Roberts did a great job on the field for Auburn in this season. And I didn't have I wouldn't have had any issues with him returning if the on the field stuff was the only thing that was a factor in this. Let's see. We got Auburn Dad for Life jumping in with a super chat here. Says, okay, Ron is out. Does K. Scott come back? I don't know.
I don't know if those two things are tied together. Yeah, but
that's still completely a Keontae Scott decision, and we'll see. He's been clear in his communication, not just with me, because people for some reason think I'm just defending him, that he doesn't actually want to leave Auburn. I do know some of his reasoning, and I am still going to let him speak on his own reasonings as to why he decided to do what he did. When Keontae makes his decision, whether it's to return or to continue in his path out in the portal, I'm sure he will make all of those things clear.
Yeah, I don't think it's clear to people that even though you entered the portal, it does not mean you cannot still return to your team.
Yeah.
It just means that you met the deadline for making sure that you were in there so that if you decide to go another direction, you can. Right. And he'll have to make a decision about that pretty soon, I would think, if it's not final in his head already, because you got to enroll in classes somewhere. And
right. That's funny. Ed Darby said Ron transferred. The
coaching transfer portal.
That's funny. Jazzy Joe with the super chat here says, how do y'all feel if Kelly gets the job and also if Kiffin gets it? What are y'all's takes on both? So talking about Chris Kiffin, the current, I think he is he's either the defensive coordinator or the linebackers coach. I don't know right now at the Houston Texans. Speaking of Charles Kelly, who is currently been hired as a co-DC, and now who knows what that's going to be in this new staff that's going to have to be constructed under Ron Roberts. I'll start with the guy who's already on staff, and that is Charles Kelly. I think Charles Kelly is an excellent position coach. The only sample size I have for him as a defensive coordinator isn't good, and that was at Colorado this past season. So I can't say that I'd be super excited about Charles Kelly being the defensive coordinator unless he's going to be paired with a co-DC that I feel like can help make sure that we're going to be in the right situations consistently. I didn't follow Colorado enough to be able to say anything about what their talent level was or the type of decisions he was making on a consistent basis with that defense. I just know what the statistics look like and how many points people were putting up on that team. And that just doesn't sound like a winning proposition. So I have to be honest. I don't feel like I'm going to be super excited to hear Charles Kelly's the new defensive coordinator for Auburn. But he's an amazing recruiter, and maybe with a talent difference. Again, I don't know what the talent level was at that Colorado team. I'd have to assume it wasn't great considering what their record was the year before he got there and how little additional defensive talent they brought in subsequent to Coach Prime being brought in. So can't say that I'm super excited about that, but we'll see. As far as Chris Kiffin is concerned, I think that he's a good defensive coordinator. He is an excellent recruiter, right? And so you would bring a new ridiculous recruiting staff in when you talk about having Charles Kelly and Chris Kiffin there available, and then if you're keeping Zach Etheridge on board with that team, good grief, man! Like the defensive recruiting that could happen amongst those three, and what I feel like Aldridge is doing a good job of. Coach Garrett seems like he's doing an excellent job in recruiting.
Yep.
That's a very dynamic recruiting staff that you'd have on board if those are the guys that are there. So, yeah, I think I would feel good about that. I don't know enough about schematically what Chris Kiffin does for me to have a really good opinion on that. But he's had some good defenses in the past, and again, he's coaching defenses at the pro level, so you can't be mad at that. Any thoughts on either of those hires, Kelly or Kiffin?
Yeah, I honestly did need to look into both those guys more. And we'll do probably more detailed breakdown on defensive coordinator candidates. There's two trains of thought here. You want to bring in a guy. How much did you like what you did last year, and how much do you want to continue that? I saw some people in the chat saying, I wasn't really feeling the 3-3-5. Like, do you bring in somebody? And I, question for you: how much is defense, or how much does a philosophy change on defense affect the defensive players that you have? We know what it can do on offense. If you go from a pro style to, a hurry up, no huddle attack, but, is there an effect on defensive players with a change in defensive coordinators?
I mean, yeah. I mean, because listen, I talk about this with offensive coordinators and how play calling or making decisions is more art than it is anything else. And there are philosophical differences with the way that people approach things, right? So you could run the exact same defensive scheme, but how often you play zone, right? How often you blitz, how often you go to some sort of press man, what types of zone you run out of those schemes, right? Like personnel groupings and then decisions of what you do with those personnel groupings are tied to that person's personality who's making the play calls. So the philosophy of that coach will really dictate how the flow of that game goes and how well they're able to kind of predict what an offensive play caller likes to do in certain scenarios and how you're going to equip your team to be able to deal with that. So all of those things are difficult things to be able to do unless you've seen them make those types of calls on a consistent basis. So yeah, the play caller or the defensive coordinator absolutely matters in those scenarios. It's not just about what the scheme is or the personnel grouping that they like to trot out there. So, with, again, 4-2-5 defenses, right, you're going to have a dedicated 4 guys that are going to be across the line of scrimmage, but only 3 of them are hand in the dirt. So is that drastically different than playing a 3-3-5
right,
when one of those guys is a hybrid linebacker type? Like it's really just about what kind of front you present. You can still present a 4-man front with a 3-3-5. You can go to a bear front. Like there's a bunch of things that you can do. So again, it's more about how you utilize personnel and less about what that personnel grouping is going to be.
Yep.
And that comes down to the philosophy of the defensive coordinator that's calling those plays, not just what the grouping of people is on the field. So very long explanation to say it matters.
Absolutely.
We are in here talking about the situation with the defensive coordinator who is on the way out. Ron Roberts, after 1 year, DC looks like he is headed to Florida. While we've got you guys here, make sure that you are hitting up our show sponsor, goldenscastiron.com, using code Get Your Weight Up, or there's a link, goldenscastiron.com/WR. You can use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off of weights and code TWR for $65 off of Fire Pits and Kamado Grills. They've been a great sponsor of the War Report, and we appreciate them for continuing to help us out with all things going on here with the War Report.
Yeah. Look, it appears to me that Hugh Freeze is trimming the hedges, so to speak, right? Like, and he may be doing that with a brand new lawnmower 5.0 beard trimmer from Manscaped. It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's the ball trimmer sent from space. Gentlemen, our friends over at Manscaped have been working day and night to bring you a below-the-waist grooming experience like none other with their brand new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. We're talking about next-generation trimmer with interchangeable blade heads for whatever shade your mind can imagine. AI is cool, but I think this might be the biggest technological advancement the world has ever seen. Visit manscaped.com for 20% off using code rapport. That gives you free shipping as well. High tech for low places. Manscaped. We love them. Great sponsors of the War Rapport here. I had a question for you, Ike.
Yep.
So now you're going into year 2 with a different defensive coordinator. What sort of expectations should people have for the defense going into year 2? I asked the question about, like, hey, does this, how do your players have to adjust really to this? Like, because there's a feeling that defense is defense, but, should people expect steps forward on defense in year 2 here with a new defensive coordinator, considering all your key pieces that can return, do return?
I mean, I think that there's a potential for steps forward, but there are a lot of, like, I think that there was a potential that you were going to go backwards anyway this season, unless you hit on a lot of your young guys or you did some sort of job in the portal that allows you to fill the gaps. Like, let's not forget your starting safety, all world safety. Like, let's be for real. Jalen Simpson is that guy, is not going to be back. Your very reliable and sticky outside corner in DJ James, not going to be back. Very seasoned, speedy outside corner in Nehemiah Pritchett, not going to be back. Your best defensive lineman, Marcus Harris, not going to be back. So there are issues that you've got to figure out how to resolve in personnel alone. You got a lot of maybes out there. You don't have any definitives on what you're going to do with those, right? Like, as much as I like K and Lee, is he going to be able to be DJ James in year 2? I don't know the answer to that. I like him. Is he going to be able to fill in for that? Without those guys that I just talked about, that defense didn't look good against Maryland in the bowl game. And that's with Ron Roberts calling the defense, right? So is there a potential for some regression in year 1? Yeah, there definitely is. But is there enough talent, and do we have enough people coming back with some sort of semblance of continuity, whether it's the exact same scheme but just philosophically similar, that we could see an improvement? Absolutely the case as well. So I think there's just a lot of uncertainty around what that defense can be coming up in year 2 under Coach Hugh Freeze. And this does nothing but, I think, add to that uncertainty. But it definitely wipes the slate clean and gives you an opportunity for some guys to maybe even flourish more because they're getting different kinds of opportunities with a new DC.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be, like I said, I just think it'll be interesting to see what happens in this. I think he's going to get a good hire, personally. I think he's going to get a good hire. I think that this is, he's fortunate to not be in the position that Harsin was with, he's not considered a lame duck coach, and he's going to be able to get somebody to come and work for him, with seemingly a bright future in front of him. So I don't, maybe the Philip Montgomery thing pointed to some despair because of why they were making this decision, but I don't think that fans should be despaired about this at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, listen, I'm sure there are still going to be people who don't like the look. I mean, the optics of it are not great. Like, let's be clear. Both coordinators leaving after year 1 is not the most ideal thing that you would want. But again, I go back to, I feel like the Ron Roberts thing was necessary if the locker room was the way that it has been rumored to be. And then I think the Monty thing was inevitable, right? So one out of necessity and the other one just, like, I don't know that it was ever going to really work. You might as well rip the Band-Aid off and get to it more immediately. Makes the most sense in the world to me. So the optics of it don't look great, but I think the final outcome could be good. But there's a lot of things, again, that still need to happen to make sure that this turns into the right direction. Otis Smith jumping in with the super chat saying 3-4 is the best defense you can run, hands down. I don't know that I agree this is the best defense you could run, hands down. I'm more of a 4-3 person. I actually like 4-2-5 as well. I don't know that I think it's really more so about how you put people in position than it is about, how many defensive linemen, how many linebackers, how many DBs are on the field, especially when you have people who can play in multiple places so that you can be deceptive in the way that you want to bring pressure and figure out different ways to run different types of defense or styles of defense out of the same personnel packages. So I think it's more important to be multiple than it is to be restricted in a specific way that you do things. And then if you're running, anyway, I'm glad you have a definitive way that you like defenses, but I don't know that I agree with that. Another super chat here from Todd Joyner says, K. Scott now out of the portal according to his Twitter. So, of course, I've been on the live and I haven't had an opportunity to talk with him. But if he says it on his Twitter, then I ain't the one to tell you any differently. So
yeah,
I probably will get on the phone with him as soon as we get off of this live so I can get the scoop on what's going on there.
We haven't had a chance to talk about this, I think, on air yet, but, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but it should be noted about the portal process that once you turn in your paperwork, the school is not obligated to immediately release your name into the portal. They actually have up to 72 hours before they have to release your name into the portal. It's why you may hear a report that some guy entered the portal but may not see his name immediately in there. He turned in his paperwork. During that time, anything could happen. Right? A guy can withdraw his paperwork. He can call and say, never mind, change my mind. But after 72 hours, we do know that they have to, if paperwork was turned in, they have to release that name into the portal. They cannot hold that up indefinitely. So, that buffer time is something I think that's necessary to make sure that I'm not sure this is what was intended, but it's an opportunity for a kid, if he made a spur of the moment decision, to consider that before there's a media crap storm around him turning in his paperwork. That's one of the reasons why we wait before we report people have entered the portal, because until the school officially releases it, anything could happen with that kid. There was a certain beat reporter that reported Tank was in the portal, and then
and to be clear, I'm looking at it too right now on Twitter. I don't see him actually saying that anywhere on his Twitter, so I'm not sure what Todd was referring to there, but I don't see him actually posting that on Twitter anywhere. So we'll see. Yeah, but again, I'll talk to him afterwards.
He's more of an Instagram guy, isn't he? Like
he gets on Twitter too, but again, I don't see it on there. Todd said it was on Twitter, so but I'll definitely give him a call once we get off of here and see what's up.
Okay, all right, love it.
But yeah, no, I mean, but there's a lot of reasons, and again, never mind. I don't want to get into it because then people be like, why don't you just tell us? And because I can't. So anyway, but we will see what happens with Keontae Scott if he is indeed not in the portal. His name was never released to the portal. Let's start there.
Yeah,
right?
It's not like if you go check any official site, his name is not in the portal. Right? Yeah. So again, there's a buffer. There's a 72-hour buffer. I forgot when did that news. We would be approaching that now, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so by midnight tonight, maybe they would have to release it. If
B-Rad said that he was on somebody's live and said it. He said he isn't in the portal, so I'm guessing that was on a Twitter space or of some sort that he announced that. So okay,
all right.
Rick Casanave with the super chat here, who says NIL and transfer portal are changing the style in which these coordinators and coaches handle players. A lot of coaches will not adapt to that and disappear. I mean, listen, you have to change the landscape. I mean, this definitely has changed the landscape of what college football is, but you have to change your approach because gone are the days that you can just have a guy come in and you shelve them, right? You have to tell the truth to what the expectations are for those players, and you have to be able to make sure that not unfortunately. I was going to say unfortunately, but you just have to make sure that those players continue to feel comfortable with the direction and really over communicate with them what the plan is for them specifically. So I think more coaches need to figure out what their proactive communication plans are going to be with players consistently so that they understand where they are on the depth chart, why they are where they are on the depth chart, and what things they can do to be able to climb that and what kind of process that needs to take so that they can make real, true decisions about what their future is going to be with the program, an informed decision about that.
Yep.
Now, when you get into the NIL side of this, that's when it becomes convoluted, right? Because even if you're happy with where you are, you look across the locker room at somebody else who plays a very similar position to you, and you're wondering, we play similar minutes. Why is it that this guy's making this in NIL and I'm making this? Or they haven't even played a single snap here and they got this. I think it's like you start getting into that whole thing, and that's where it gets into this, what the NFL is, where it's like, well, the average salary for a guy who has stats like me is this, so the team needs to be able to meet me here. And you get into this weird negotiation process with all of these collectives. I'm in favor of collectives. I'm in favor of the transfer portal. I'm in favor of NIL, and I'm in favor of the transfer portal. I think these collectives have actually screwed this up ridiculously right now, because it's made it where you're getting a stipend essentially monthly for being affiliated with a school. And that's when you get into what feels like pay for play. The difference is these young men don't actually have to be playing in order to be paid, right? Like, because it's not tied to your play. It can't be, because they're not authorized from the school. So if you don't pay a single snap and you sign a deal with the NIL collective for a year, if you don't play any snaps, you still get the same amount of money. That's not how it is in the NFL. You get game checks, right? Or you have incentive-based things. You can't do that with NIL. It's supposed to be about how popular you are as a player. So they have to figure out other ways to be able to utilize that in some way. It's crazy. It is absolutely maddening what's happening right now with that. And I understand the frustration of a lot of fans in regard to that. More chats in here. Let's see. B Palmer 636 says third down defense was trash. I can't say that I disagree with you. Auburn did have an issue on third down this year, and the question you have to ask yourself is that scheme, is that call, or was that play, right? Like, was it he had the right call on, the players didn't execute it well. He was making the right calls in certain situations. He was making the wrong calls and not having people in the proper position consistently. Or is it just the way that things were schemed that just didn't allow for it, right? Again, how much zone are you playing? How much man are you playing? When do you decide to play man versus zone? Those are all defensive coordinator decisions that you have to be able to make. And if the defensive coordinator is not making those correct calls for the personnel that he has in the game, then you run into issues where you're not able to execute in key moments the way that you need to. AU Curmudgeon says third down's been trash for years. Let's be clear. You're not wrong. Also, that's actually the case for a lot of places all around the country at the Power 5 level. I've said this many times. College coaches more and more now are recruiters with titles. They're not play callers or people who study the game, and they're not ones that can teach. Your analysts actually know more about studying the game than some of the people with the titles. The people with the titles are there so that you can pay them what you need to so that they can go out there and recruit and bring you in talent. So you're seeing a lot of really bad decisions, bad plays, guys not being developed because you just don't have developmental type people in these Power 5 positions anymore. And it's really hurting the product of the consistency of a lot of these bigger programs out here. You find a lot more of your talent developers and such in the FCS and the group of 5 levels because they have to work with what's left over from all the talent that goes to these, all the 4 and 5 stars are going to the Power 5 places. They're having to work with the 2 and 3 stars and really develop them into good players to have winning programs. So you just end up having a lot of really bad football getting played in these Power 5 conferences, it's particularly in key moments because you got people who are really talented, they don't know what the heck they're doing out there. So it just kind of is what it is. Hopefully we will get out of that space here at Auburn and get into a more consistent ability to deliver in big moments, and that's how you develop winning programs. I've seen somebody, I don't know if it's the same person, but I've seen multiple times here in the chat people mentioning Ken Norton Jr. as a potential person. I don't know if he has. Now, listen. Myself, again, big 49ers fan. Ken Norton Jr. was a player for the 49ers and a coach there on staff with them. He also played and coached for some teams I am not a fan of, so I won't hold that against him. But, he would be a good hire. I don't know. He doesn't have any ties to the university or really the conference. Has he ever coached in college? There's a lot about that. I mean, he's a great defensive mind. Is he the right fit for college? I have no idea. I don't know what Ken Norton's doing right now with his life. I actually am not keeping up with that. I think I feel like he's at a college somewhere. He was just recently. I don't know. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But and then does he have any ties to Coach Hugh Freeze at all as to whether or not they would have a good working relationship. I don't have the first clue about any of that stuff. But again, great defensive mind and Ken Norton there. Let's see. A lot of chats coming in. We appreciate you guys coming in. Otis Smith with another super chat says, we poach little Riley from Clemson as our OC. I don't know about this one. I don't think that Coach Freeze wants to go and get a play caller as his offensive coordinator right now. I think he wants to be able to call plays himself. And so I don't know that Coach Riley will want to come someplace where he's going to get the play sheet taken out of his hands and he wants to just step and be a play designer or something like that. I don't think that that works in this scenario. If Coach Freeze is going the direction that I assume he's going, and that is that he wants to be a play caller, I don't know if you're going to go get a dynamic play caller as the hire for the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Let's see. I mean, you guys are throwing out a lot of names in here. Tiffany Byers just gifted some more War Report memberships. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, with the War Report memberships, man, we're doing a lot of film review. I've got some film review coming up for some of the new transfer portal folks that we've had coming in, so you guys need to be a member to get on board with that. We got a lot of stuff that we're doing behind the paywall with our members in regard to film review, so trying to get you guys informed there. Let's see here. I'm telling y'all, Dame is the move. Who is Dame? Who are we talking about with Dame?
Dame Dash? Agreed. Right. Rockefeller.
Damon Stoudemire, like we're going to, like, you know, it's his time. I don't know who is Dame. Clarify that for us, and we can embark on the conversation about that. Apparently, Eugene Asante isn't happy about it. He made a post on Twitter. You know, listen, Eugene he's a very loyal guy, so he probably, you know, loved what was happening. Listen, Eugene Asante, I mean, he wasn't getting a chance before Ron Roberts got here. So, you know, I would see why that. And then he made the decision to come back for another season. I'm assuming that Ron Roberts was a part of that decision process for him. So, you know, we'll see. Let's see. I'm looking at the post right now. It says, took a linebacker who wasn't deemed not good enough to play for a previous staff and helped him be one of the leading tacklers in the SEC. For y'all to say he ain't a good coach is stupid and need to be examined. Thank you for everything you did for me, Coach. You instilled confidence into me as a player, and I will use everything you taught me daily. Good look at Florida.
Yeah, look, here's what I will say about this as far as Eugene is concerned. Eugene is just a team. He's a team guy. He's one of those guys that absolutely no coach would have an issue with. None. And in return, you know, he probably didn't have an issue with them. But Eugene is like your model student athlete, though.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so, you know, he's allowed his opinion. Just like there may be those who felt like, you know, this change was needed. So I just think that if he's seeing things on social media about people saying he wasn't a good coach, I thought he was a good defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Right. But I also was not being coached by him.
Right.
So, you know, somebody else who's been coached by him may have had a different experience. It is
likely a bunch of fans who are still mad about the ending of the Iron Bowl. Right. Like the opinion of him went down drastically in the last 3 games of the season. Let's be clear. New Mexico State, the Iron Bowl, and that bowl game all made the opinion of Ron Roberts crash and burn in the eyes of a lot of, and I'll call most of them casual fans who didn't really understand how good that defense had been for the vast majority of the year. That doesn't mean that if you dislike Ron Roberts, you are a casual fan. Like, 2 things can be true at one time. But what I am saying is that there is a portion of the fan base who 4th and 31 is forever going to be ingrained in their mind, and they will be tied indelibly to the name of Ron Roberts as the defensive coordinator in that scenario. What was an abysmal first quarter of a bowl game in the Music City Bowl is going to be tied to Ron Roberts, right? You don't fall 21-0 in the hole, and you feel a lot better about the scenario of what happened the subsequent 3 quarters there. Now, your offense didn't help you out very much, but hey, you still got 21 points scored on you in a quarter. And then inexplicably, you couldn't stop New Mexico State, right? And so there are people who those three things, the last, what have you, this is always going to be a what have you done for me lately type of scenario with any coach. And the last memories that you have of him are 3 games that you want to forget. And so I don't disagree with Eugene Asante. People
Mhm.
calling him a bad
Coach, yeah,
defensive
yeah, yeah, yeah,
coordinator, I
yeah.
don't think
I don't
is
agree with
fair.
that. But like,
Um,
but you know, if that opinion is coming from any, because a player though would have a different context for what
right.
is good and bad, right? Because it's more than just about scheme. To them, it's the whole experience with that coach. Fans, it's either good or bad. So I think if you're a fan and you're saying that based on just play calling, because I'm telling you, after the Iron Bowl, there were people who were like firing,
Right. Yeah. Immediately.
because of 4th and 31. And I get that that's an emotional reaction, but like the totality of his season was not 4th and 31. This was an overperforming defense under Ron Roberts, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I thought Derek Mason did a good job in year one. People wanted him fired after year one. Um, I just have different opinions about whether or not a coach is good, and that's fine. We can have differing opinions about things. We don't have to agree on that. Thomas Jones with the super chat says D. Craig as co OC just in name wise, but coming into to concrete on recruiting, and that is who Blue Chris meant by Dame. He meant Damian Craig as the answer there for the offensive coordinator. I don't know. I mean, listen, Damian Craig would be a name, again, that has the affiliation with Auburn that you would want. Good recruiter. That would be, you would get polar opposites of people's reaction to Damian Craig as a hire. There are some people who are absolutely opposed to that hire, and there are some people who would love to see it happen. So that would be an interesting one. It would fit the criteria where Coach Freeze wouldn't have to be removed from the play calling. He could continue to be the OC that he wants to be and to be
Yep.
the primary play caller. So it would fit in that way. And he would get his recruiting guy on the offensive side to help him run that organization. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but Damian Craig's name is one that has come up pretty frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard any rumbles from anybody who's doing any hiring and firing.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Would be a good look. I know I can say this now. Uh, Cam Coleman had a great relationship with Damian Craig.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
a phenomenal relationship with Damian Craig. And so, if you're Hugh, like I'm not saying that Damian Craig was coming here, and like I don't know. I just know that he's a great recruiter,
Yeah, he is.
and he's a phenomenal recruiter, and his relationships with the kids are unmatched. Man, they love him. And parents have told us the same. Damien is the reason my kid was considering X school, right? Like, so it would be a good hire from that standpoint. Now, will he line up with a coach that doesn't want to let him do play calling? It was, I mean, I've heard this is an issue at other stops, including here, where he wanted to go a certain direction and they either didn't want to turn it over to him or they didn't want to let him call plays. And so, maybe that's something he wants to do. I just don't know that it would be a good fit with Freeze, considering what we know about moving on from Philip Montgomery. You can't
Right.
hire a guy and have more tug of war. Like that would be disaster for Auburn.
Yeah, I think it just needs to. They need to be solidified on what direction they want to take, and I'm going to, because I don't really have a choice, but I'm going to have to just trust that Coach Freeze has a plan in place to make all of these things make sense. Daniel Moultrie jumps in and says, "How about T-Rob, fellas? Would be another weapon in the Ryan Williams
Well,
flip arsenal. My other
look, man.
choice would be T. Will or Arnett.
T something, man. T Bone Steak. Like, let's get a T in here. T Will would be another great choice from a recruiting standpoint. Um,
T-Rob.
yeah, T Will, both
Yeah,
would be a great choice from a recruiting standpoint. But
yeah,
I think that T Will is getting too much of a bad rap for that Arkansas defense and how they played in year one of
mm-hmm.
his tutelage. Like, he walked into a mess, guys. Arkansas was a mess. I think if he stays there, you'll see a marked improvement in that defense in year two. But what could he do with the talent at Auburn? Oh, I think he would be a killer defensive coordinator. But T Rob, man, if T Rob came to Auburn, defensive back play, like Auburn would produce a Thorpe Award winner within 3 years.
So the only reason I would hesitate on T-Rob, right, is because I don't know what you then do with the remainder of your staff, right? Because
Yeah.
T-Rob is a defensive back guy. You've already got Charles Kelly, who is a DB guy. He could coach linebackers, but you've already got a linebackers coach that you're not kicking off of the staff. Coach Etheridge is still sitting right there, right? So you can't have 3 DB coaches out there, even so. What usually happens, especially in situations where you're going to have co-DCs, which is what is being rumored going to be the thing with Kelly. If he's going to be co-DC and T-Rob comes in and he's going to be DC/co-DC, he's going to have a room in order for it to make sense from a money standpoint. So Kelly if he's going to be in there, he's going to be a co-DC/safeties coach. If you keep Etheridge out there, then he's going to be your DB coach for your outside DBs. And then who is T-Rob coaching? Like, what is he coming in here to do? That's where it just doesn't fit as far as how you've comprised your stuff. So I don't know how you retain Coach Etheridge and you hire T-Rob in order for everybody to have an on-the-field job. If you bring in a guy like Chris Kiffin or you bring in a guy like Zach Arnett, you're in a similar situation unless you do outside and inside linebackers, right? So if you break up the room where you have somebody doing outside linebacker/jackbackers, then you could have somebody who's just coaching pass rushing and getting the guys to be in those positions, and you have your interior linebackers coach, and they could handle those things separately. So that makes a little bit more sense for how you comprise your your defensive rooms. So I just don't know how it works if you do that stuff. But I mean, again, there's a lot of speculation out there about directions that could be taken. We will find out which direction that Coach Freeze wants to go very soon, I am sure. Otis Smith still tossing out names. Super chat here says, go get Joe Brady. Joe Brady, I mean, listen, of course, he's not a defensive guy. He's an offensive guy. I don't know. I don't know what Joe Brady wants to even come back to the college ranks, and if he's good at the NFL.
Passing game would be lit. That's for sure. Passing game coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, is he going to bring his quarterback from LSU back with him for another year of eligibility too? Right? Like coordinating a passing game works when you have the right trigger person, right? So I don't know. So we'll see. We've got a lot of things left to iron out, a lot of news left to be discovered. But we're going to get out of here. We appreciate you guys jumping in with us. We appreciate everybody for kind of coming in here, spilling all of their thoughts on what they think about this. If you're watching this later, please continue to give us your thoughts here in the live chat. We'll definitely continue these conversations as we hear more. But we'll get out of here. Until then, and as always, War Eagle.